And now I'll jump into the RAPTOR. This is the main presentation of today. So it's a 35.4 megapixel. In terms of size and pixels, it matches with Monstro, but it is ground up new sensor. It's not, a Monstro sensor packaged in a new, when it's not. Because it has got, there are, if you want to shoot number of frames per second, which is very, very important, especially for Indian cinema, the frame rates, the slow motion is the pedigree. It's the most important thing apart from the dynamic range and color science. So if you want to shoot more number of frames, first and foremost, the sensor has to produce more number of frames. That is the most important thing. If the sensor is limited, Monstro sensor, at the sensor level itself, it cannot shoot more than 8K 60 frames per second. That is the maximum you might have seen on Monstro cameras. This sensor is a newly developed sensor. It can do 8K 120 frames per second. Apart from sensor doing the number of frames, the slow motions, once the sensor captures the slow motion image, it should have a possibility, the computing power to process those 8K 120 frames per second and store it in the media. So that is where, apart from sensor, the camera system comes to picture. The camera system, as we know, they are, the computing power wise, we are capable of doing that. But in terms of sensor, it's a breakthrough. 8K 120 frames per second is a breakthrough. That is the major advantage. So we are going to go in detail about high-speed image. And in terms of dynamic range, it has gotten half stop to two-thirds stop better, especially in shadow detail compared to the predecessor Monstro. So it's a multi-format camera. We had always been multi-format, as in from the beginning days. Even if you take Monstro, Monstro is an 8K sensor. It's a full frame sensor at 8K. If you go down to 6K or 5.5K, 6K, it will act as Super 35. So in 3K, it acts as Super 16 sensor. And apart from that, R3D is the major advantage. It had always been the major advantage. There is a change in R3D. We changed the compression system. We made it easier. We're going to talk about that. Yeah, the form factor. It has gotten much smaller compared to DSM-C2s. It has got, in terms of how tall it is, in terms of the width, it is much smaller. I would say around 35% smaller than, 30-35% smaller than the Monstro Helium DSM-C2 lineup. And high-speed media, I think I'll show you. Previously, on RED cameras, we used to have mini mags, that is solid state drives. But with the advent of technology, we went the generic way. This is 660 GB and there will be a 2 TB variant coming soon. It will be of this size. These are Bs basically. These are CF Express type B cards. These cards are capable of writing at 1700 megabytes per second. That is more than twice the capacity of the camera. That is the important thing, because the speed of the media should always be much bigger than the speed of the computing system or the camera system. So we went with, as I said, it is not proprietary anymore. It is CF Express Type B. Right now, RED has released these cards, but in future, the third-party cards will also be supported. It's not like, you have to buy RED media. Previously, we used to have this negative commentary that, though the camera is cheap, the accessories are really expensive on RED cameras. So part of democratizing the whole process, we went with generic. If the technology is available, wherever the technology is available, we went with generic technology. Even when I talk about accessories, I'll talk about how the approach, the whole philosophy has been changed with collaborations and how we are making it, universal. So that's about the media and input-output versatility. When you see the camera hands-on, you will see there are two SDI ports, 12G SDI they are, 4K out they will take, and you will see a ODU port. ODU port can be broken into, you can break it down into the audio for sound, and there is there is a general extension port. Extension port is used for your sync sound and other purposes, or if you are using multiple camera system where you want to sync all the cameras, that will be used for all these purposes. So that is about I/O versatility. Compared to DSMC2, DSMC2 used to have only 1080p out. We've got because of 3G SDI. This is 12G SDI, and it will give 4K outs. These two can be either mirrored or independent. We'll talk in detail about it. And there is another USB Type-C port right now, which is right now it is not enabled, but in future it will be enabled with the help of free firmware upgrades. So, new interfaces. The monitor you are seeing right now, this is unlike any other old RED cameras. I'm going to talk about this interface. There will be buttons, there will be a small monitor, so that your first AC, your focus puller, your basically will not be meddling with you when you are composing and when you are busy lighting, checking your monitor. Your monitor will be your own monitor, and your first AC can do changes, operations and all from the side monitor. That is what we've taken from our competition. Now I think with RED adapting this side display interface, majority of all professional camera systems have that thing. That is became one universal design. So we are going to talk about that. This is the size comparison. The first one is Ranger, the second one is DSMC2, the third one is Raptor, fourth is Komodo. So it used to be, Ranger will weigh around 3.5 kilos, just the brain will weigh around 3.5 kilos, 3 to 4 kilograms, and height will be 160 mm by 152 mm by 206 mm. Now the comparison should be fair comparison should be between DSMC2 and VRaptor, because VRaptor is DSMC3. We are having another camera which is announced, which is called VRaptor XL. That is an extension, next generation Ranger camera. Basically, this is the cinema camera system. DSMC2 and DSMC3 are our cinema camera systems, and Ranger and the future XL are going to be our studio camera systems. So the design will be based on that requirements. Now, if you compare with DSMC2 and compare the DSMC2 with the Raptor, the weight is almost same, around half a kilo, less than half a kilo it got reduced. The height of the camera is 14.4 millimeter, that is DSMC2, your Monstro. The height of this camera is 108 millimeters, basically 10.8 centimeters. It's the size of, it is less than the small scale we use. The width is also 108 millimeters, that is 10.8 centimeters. On DSMC2 it is 125 millimeters. The length is almost similar, 160 millimeters versus 155 millimeters. There is a 5 millimeter depreciation from the, basically it got much smaller. If you compare these systems with this camera, Komodo, this is a 2-pound camera. Just the camera will be less than 1 kilogram, that camera. And as I said, it's a 4.5 inch cuboid. The camera comes with a native RF mount. The reason why we went with RF mount is, the flange distance, the distance between the mount and the sensor. If it is smaller, you can extend it, because PL will be having around 45-50 millimeter flange distance, and latest RF mount and even latest Nikon mount, RF is new Canon mount. So all these new mounts, they are less than 20 millimeter in flange distance. So if you are having less flange distance, you can extend it, but if the camera comes with PL mount, you cannot make it, you cannot reduce it. That's the whole idea. Why do we need RF mount or new age mounts? That will be a fair question. there is something called PDAF that is in beta mode right now. PDAF is phase detect autofocus. It is going to be, the autofocus is going to be the future advanced feature in these cameras. With the firmware upgrades, you are going to get that feature. Right now it is there, but it is in testing mode or beta mode. So for that mode, if you want to use that kind of mode, basically, as I said, this camera is not just for high-end budget, high-budgeted, high-end production cinemas, but it is also for owner-operators, smaller documentary film people, natural history. In the showreel we have shown you, you have seen some National Geographic, BBC footage. Even for those kind of things where the crew is less, we have to support those people as well. That is the idea of this creating DSMC system basically. Now, the PDAF will not be possible on PL mount lenses. That is the reason why we went with RF mount. But you can use third-party adapters. There are companies which are working close with Red, like Kippertie, like Wooden Camera. You can convert the RF mount into PL mount. Right now, what this particular camera is having is Wooden Camera's RF to PL mount. So with the adapter, it can be rock solid. You just need to have a support. That's all. But things are working. I am seeing from past 6-7 months, because of different reasons, COVID and government certifications. Actually, the introduction of this camera into India has become late. We are late by 6 months. That is actually advantage. If you see, there are disadvantages, but advantages, major advantages, the world has tested the camera, and what are the problems with the camera, issues with the camera, we already know. So, the adapter first, people talked about adapter is not really a good way, but I have seen, and I was part of shoots where biggest lenses right now, like Cook 1.8x anamorphic lens, one of the biggest lenses in size, they are sitting without any lens support on the adapter, and they're working extraordinarily. So that is about RF mount. And we have something called micro V-lock plate. As I said, that the idea of this camera is to create the smallest possible camera. Compared to this, XL will be much bigger camera, just like DSMC2 and Ranger. This is small camera. Because of the protrusion of the I/O board, basically the SDI port, the Wi-Fi antenna, and all these ports coming to the front, you cannot put the regular sized V-lock battery. But right now, the industry is having something called micro V-lock. Micro V-lock is, in terms of the locking system, it's the same size, but in terms of width, it will be smaller. So that's about a micro V-lock plate. And as I've told you about the CF Express Type B media, it can do up to 1700 megabytes per second writing speeds. That is the major thing. And one most important thing people will not realize, with the advent of better media, the offload times, for example, for 660 GB, the copy time has become 7 minutes. It was not the case previously. So this will help people, especially if you are in remote locations where you do not have access to a lot of media. You need to, and you are shooting longer takes. These are all the reality of our lives. This can happen. The longer takes can happen. The director can ask for 10 minutes of a take. We cannot say no. So in such situations, this will be really an oxygen of offloading the footage. 660 GB, 7 minutes is almost nothing. So yeah, that's the advantage. The reason why we went with CF Express Type B. As I said, the assistant interface, I'm going to switch on the camera. So there are so many advantages of this small monitor. You can see top, you can see, oops. in the top you can see 4 buttons, and the bottom you can see 4 buttons. There are user pages. When you are doing hands-on, I will show you. There are side buttons. If you press on this top arrow, you will get the user page. There will be 3 user pages, and for each user page you can assign 8 buttons. So you can, all in all, the focus puller or the first assistant can assign 24 shortcuts. Based on the requirement of the cinematographer, 24 shortcuts can be assigned and can be used without disturbing cinematographer, who is obviously focusing on the framing and the lighting and the other aesthetic things. So that's the major thing. All the major settings can be assigned in up to 24 different buttons. There will be 3 user pages. So yeah, this is custom user pages. Yeah, you can see the animation on this, and when you press the top arrow, it is going to change to user 1. And I1 connectivity. This is, as I said, these are 2 SDI ports. Both the SDI ports are 12G SDI ports. They are capable of giving 4K signal. Both can be either mirrored or independent. You can choose 2 different things, as in, if the director doesn't want menus, for example, he just wants to see what has he got with, for example, I don't want to see the 8K, the 172.8, all these things, we can give the clean feed to the director, and for second monitor, for the second SDI we can have, or for the EVF, the SDI EVF, we can have all the menus. So basically, or if you want to create one particular look for one SDI and one particular look without a look applied, LUT applied, you want to see the saturated, basically the milky log image on the other monitor, you can do that. Basically, they can be independent, completely independent, or you can basically mirror them. So that is the 2 SDI ports, and the 5-pin ODU port you see right here. This is 5-pin ODU port that can be broken into your XLR audio out. That is for Nagara, basically the sound people. You can connect that to the 5-pin ODU port. There is 9-pin EXT port that is used for timecode genlock. If you want to do the sync sound, then you can do that. You can use that port and you can jam with the camera, and timecode will be synced. You will be using this 9-port EXT port. Apart from that, there is Type-C port, as I said. For now, it is not enabled, but in future it will be enabled. I'm hearing very great news about that USB-C port. Once it's implemented, it is going to give a lot of advantage. And there is a Wi-Fi antenna. You can see the antenna here, the small antenna. This is dual band 5G 2.4G antenna. The advantage of this antenna is there is something called Red Control app, which is free on Android and iPhone. You can operate everything on the camera. It's a very intuitive app. I would recommend you to check it out. You can download it. You can connect to the Wi-Fi of the camera in ad hoc mode. The camera itself will work as a Wi-Fi router. You are going to connect to it, and it is going to give you 1080p feed as well. It is not useful for example, for operating, obviously, because of the lag. There will be some lag, but for monitoring it will be a great tool. And apart from that, you can do all setting changes. Especially it will be useful when you are on Jimmy, or when you are at a certain distance where the camera cannot be accessed. Previously it used to be a nightmare, especially doing setting changes. Like in the last minute you want to have, for example, you want to cut the light by another half stop or 1 stop. You want to cut the shutter to 90 degree from 180 because of the motion, or you want to do certain things that happens all the time in the last minute. Previously, it used to be a nightmare. Now, with just your cell phone, you can do that. That's one major advantage with the Wi-Fi. And there is top pogo pin. I will show you. Yeah, here you can see the top pins, the dots. That will be just like DSMC2 cameras. This monitor is connected through the top pogo pins. So yeah, the compared to Komodo will not have these pogos. You have to use the only SDI that is available on the camera on Komodo. As I said, it's a minimal system. It is not your regular cinema camera. So it will have 7-inch monitor. We are going to talk about this 7-inch monitor. As I said, we are not manufacturing. Previously, our 7-inch monitor used to be manufactured by us. Right now, we are in collaboration with Small HD. Small HD is a proven pioneer in displays. So we collaborated with that, and this monitor is a result of the collaboration. So you can check it out. Basically, you can see how intuitive the touchscreen is. It's got much faster, much better. That's about the LCD. So the heat management, that is one major improvement for us. Apart from the fan design, basically from the sides of the camera, it is going to take cold air and it is going to blow the hot air from up. Apart from the fan size, on previous cameras there used to be two small 60 mm fans and on 30 mm fans, and on this camera there is one big fan. That design we've gotten from RAPTOR. Apart from the fan and the design of the fans, there is new thing, that is thermoelectric heat exchanger. This is a technology. This is the technology that we've adapted from our competition again. It's gotten the sensor temperatures, tolerance of the sensor for heat increase in temperatures much better. Previously, if you are a reducer, you used to do calibration. If the temperature is risen by, for example, 10 to 15 degrees centigrade, we used to recommend this calibration. Do the calibration again. You change from air-conditioned room to mid-May exterior. Then, if the temperature has risen a lot, then we used to recommend the calibration. The calibration is needed even now, but the tolerance has been much more. As in 25 degree change in sensor temperature, we would need another calibration. So you will not be basically, under normal circumstances, you will not be needing a calibration. That is because of thermoelectric heat exchanger. It's a new technology basically. It can maintain the sensor temperature. At what temperature you have done the calibration, it can maintain that temperature. So yeah, the sensor. The first major advantage, apart from the frame rate, of course, we'll talk about frame rates in a bit. It has got integrated autofocus. The name of the system is PDAF. PDAF is a universal system. It is not developed by RED, especially Sony's and Canon's. You can see PDAF being implemented from almost a decade. We are in catching up game right now with autofocus. Our autofocus is not as great as them, but we are going to catch up at some point of time. 17 plus stops of dynamic range, the lowest noise floor compared to the Monstros. Compared to the Monstro, the shadows are going to be much cleaner on this camera. So it's going to be a better low light camera compared to Monstro. Monstro itself is a good camera in terms of dynamic range, but it is going to be better than Monstro.
So in terms of Gemini, how it is going to be?
No, Gemini is a 3200 dual native ISO system. This is still comparable to Monstro, but you cannot compare it with Gemini. but it will come somewhere between Monstro and Gemini. So 16-bit raw imagery, we've always given 16-bit R3D files, 16-bit raw. That is going to be the case here as well. High-speed readout, that significantly reduces rolling shutter artifacts. We are going to talk about it. The scanning, the line-by-line scanning, at the end of the day, this camera is a rolling shutter camera, but compared to the previous generation cameras, the rolling shutter artifacts are going to be much minimal, very, very minimal, because of the higher scanning rates. I am going to show you that in a slide. High speed frame rate options, as I said, in 2K it can do 600 frames per second. That's the biggest breakthrough. We know we are entering into the phantom arena. No need for cinematographer to compromise on the dynamic range side. I know how it's very difficult to get a colorful image from the industrial high-speed cameras. It's very, very difficult to match the color of high-speed cameras, industrial high-speed cameras to regular reds and aries. Now it's 500 frames per second plus is a possibility with the same color that is going to match your 24 frames per second. So that's one major breakthrough. And reduced CMOS smear and new OLPF stack. As opposed to DSMC2, the OLPF is going to be static. You cannot, it's not interchangeable, but it's got better. We are so confident of this OLPF that we removed that interchangeability. It's gotten much better to reduce the CMOS artifacts, rolling shutter CMOS artifacts. So this is sensor size comparison. In terms of size, it is comparable to Monstro. The size and the pixel pitch is same as Monstro. They are multi-format. And Helium is smaller. It is Super 35. Gemini will come somewhere between VRaptor and Helium in terms of sensor size. Dragon is smaller, and Komodo and Helium are comparable in size. So we've got basically, we are the only camera company which is having different pixel sized sensors. These many, for example, VRaptor is 5 microns and Gemini is 6 microns. The Komodo, it is 4.6 microns, and Helium is 3.5 microns, 3.5, 3.6 microns. So basically, it's like choosing your stock. In olden days, you used to choose your film stock. I want this particular number from Fuji. I want to shoot this film with this particular number from, Kodak. That is the case. That is the idea of creating different pixel pitches, and for different films, it need not be just because you are shooting with red. All the films need not be looking the same. The difference will be subtle, but nevertheless the difference will be visible. So it's a multi-format sensor. As I said, in full 8K, the full sensor will be exposed, and in 6K it acts as a Super 35 sensor. If you want to shoot, for example, one particular sequence, for example, in your film there is a flashback episode. That flashback you want to use Super 35. You want to change the perspective of one particular episode. You want to shoot with, for example, you are shooting with Supreme Primes for the entire film, but only one particular episode you want to shoot with Master Primes, so that you want to show the perspective difference and even the look difference. If that is the case, you can do it without compromising on the resolution. 6K resolution today is acceptable for projection, even for streaming platforms like Netflix. 6K is good enough. So you can use the 6K crop of the sensor as Super 35 sensor. It is exactly Super 35, and your 8K as your full frame 35 sensor. And for special cases, you can use 3K. 3K you can use Super 16 glass on 3K. That is one advantage. If you want to go for high speeds, 400 frames, more than 400 frames, you want to go down to 3K, you can use Super 16 lenses and you can still get it, if they are available in good condition, that is. So yeah, the major advantage, as I said, are frame rates. In 8K for open gate 17:9, you are going to get 120 frames. And 8K widescreen, that is 2.4:1, that is our film aspect ratio, you are going to get 150 frames per second in 8K widescreen. In 6K open gate, you are going to get 160. 6K widescreen, 6K 2.4:1, you are going to get 200. In 4K widescreen, 4K full open gate 240, 4K widescreen 300. And in 2K 480 and 2K widescreen, you are going to get 600 frames per second. This is literally the double of what Monstro used to give. In Monstro, if you go to 2K widescreen, it used to give 300 frames per second. In 8K, it used to give 60 frames per second. Basically, the data rates have been doubled and sensor readout has been doubled. So this particular shot is shot at 600 frames per second, 594 frames per second in 2K widescreen. So yeah, we are talking about more than 500 frames per second for the first time in a cinema camera. Previously, we used to adapt industrial cameras. They used to lack in color, they used to lack in dynamic range. Now, it's a possibility to match the color and dynamic range. So as I said, high-speed readout, that's one major thing. Because the scan time has been almost doubled on this camera, the rolling shutter artifacts will be minimized because it's reading twice faster compared to the previous generation Monstro. You are going to have lesser, of course it's not zero like on Komodo. On Komodo you can test the fans or like fast moving objects, it's a global shutter. So you are going to see no artifact at all, but it is the Raptor is not global shutter, but it's much better than previous generation cameras in terms of rolling shutter artifacts because of the high speed readout.